Hello everybody and welcome to this section of Python 3 programming. So what we did in the previous section is we were introduced to lists. We also saw some of our coding examples using lists, were functions. We also saw some of the coding examples using functions. So we coded a bunch of programs, not really anything special, but some simple programs. And then we implemented the functions to those programs. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves with the lists in Python. So first of all, let us say what lists are. So list, first of all, is a value that can store multiple values in a specific array. Now the syntax for a list in Python is square brackets. So we most likely, you know by now that once we actually use, for example, functions, we specify the values, the arguments, the parameters into the normal brackets. So the normal brackets you see everywhere. And in the lists, once you actually want to specify multiple elements in a list, you will use a square bracket in order to do that. Now, lists are most likely always used in order to store different types of elements that belong to the same group, such as, for example, animals, numbers, strings, any type of elements. It could be also integers, whatever you want. But it can also be used to store different types of elements. So you don't really need to store the strings in a certain list. You can also store strings and numbers in a one list. And we're going to take a look at that right now. So open up your idle. We're not going to code any program this time. We're just going to go over the syntax of lists and how on basically basics of the lists. And first of all, the most simple list you can create is, let me just switch it right here so I don't type the square brackets with the different keyboards. So right here, you specify the open and closed brackets, and if you just press here enter, it will spit out the empty list. If you specify just open and closed bracket, square bracket, that means that you're specifying an empty list. In order to put something in that list, you can simply just put some numbers, for example 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You simply right here created a list that has 5 integer values in it. This list has 5 elements, and those 5 elements are 5 numbers. As you can see, they are separated by comma, and they are all in between the square brackets. Now, if you want to actually create, for example, a list that is going to store animals, for example, you can do that by simply specifying the names of those animals in the list. But be careful, right now those are strings, so each of those elements have to be in between the single quotes. So for example, bat, comma, dog, comma, elephant, comma, and then snake, for example. And right here you have a list that actually has 4 animals in it. Okay, they are all in between the single quotes and separated by comma. And also, you don't really need to store the same type of elements in a list. As I said, you can actually store different types of elements. So let me show you. If you open square brackets right here, and you type here cat, for example, and then use 3, and then use, for example, 5.4 as a decimal value, and then you can use a Boolean value, which is true, and then you can also use a non-type value and simply just specifying none. This will work as well, even though I'm not really sure why would you need something like this. But if you do need, you can actually have it. As we can see, we have multiple variable types right here. Boolean values, float values, non-type, strings, integers, basically anything you want. Now, you can also store a list or the list elements into a certain variable, which will be actually a list once you actually give the value from this right here to the variable itself. But you can call it like this. So list, or let's call it like this. So numbers underscore list will be equal to open square brackets and close square brackets, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we created a numbers list that actually has these 5 elements. If you just print it, it will print out the list itself. So number underscore list. Oops, it's not number list, it's numbers list. So print numbers underscore list. And you can see it will print out the list that we specified before. Now, you can also select a specific element in that list and store it in a variable if you want to. So we know that the numbers list contains numbers from 1 through 5. And let's say we want to create a variable element which is going to be equal to the third element in this list. And the third element is number 3. Now be careful, the indexes of these elements right here don't start from 1, so this is not element 1. Pardon me, the third element will be element 4, and the reason behind that is because the actual counting of elements starts from 0. So this will be element 0, element 1, element 2, element 3, and element 4. It doesn't start counting from 1. So in order to actually give the value of the third element, this will be the value 4. So let me just show you right here. Element equals numbers underscore list. And then in the square brackets, all you specify is the 3. And you can see right here, if I just print element, you can see that the element variable is actually an integer and it is a 4. If I just type right here, type element, in order to check the actual type of the variable itself, it is an integer. And if you just type numbers list, you should see that it is a list. As we can see right here, class list, and this is a class integer. But what you might find confusing is why did we get the numbers list from the third element to be equal to 4? Well, as I said, this is element 0, element 1, element 2, and element 3 is the 4 number. Okay? In order to select, for example, the first element in the list, you will need to specify, let me just copy this so I don't write it twice. You will need to specify same right here, just in the brackets you will specify 0, and right now the element would store a value of 1. So if I just print element, it will be equal to 1. Let me just go right here. I just wanted to enlarge these fonts right here. Apply. Okay, so you can see everything better. Not really sure why I didn't do this before, but okay. Yeah, you should see everything really well right now. Let us go with the 16, and that should be it. Okay. Now, right now, let us go over this once again. So what we did is we managed to actually select a specific element from the certain list. So right now, if you, for example, want to select a second element from the list, you would need to specify 1 between the brackets right here. And now printing element will be equal to actually 2, since that is the actual second element in the list. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, there is one thing that you should know. For example, you can't really, or you can concat strings with elements from a list. So for example, if you want to print something like this, let's first create the actual list of animals, because we are going to print strings. So animals underscore list will be equal, open and close square brackets, and let us just paste these animals. So we'll actually write them twice. Let's just paste them right here in between these square brackets. And now we have animals list, which actually contains bat, dog, elephant, and snake. Now, let me just show you before we continue that animal 1 or animal can be equal to a variable animals list. If you want to select the animal to be equal to bat, you simply just specify 0, since the bat is the first element. And then if you print animal, it will say bat, as you can see right here. Okay, so let's continue now. You can concat strings with elements from the list. So if you want to print something like this, this animal is a, and then you want to actually, for example, concat the animals underscore list, and you want to specify the third element by specifying 2 in the brackets, which is going to be elephant. Okay, and then you want to concat, for example, this animal is an elephant. Okay, so we're missing an right here because we need to use proper English. This animal is an elephant and not a... And then we can concat, for example, a dog. So animals underscore list. The dog is at the first position or the second element, and then we can print this. So you can see right here, this animal is an elephant and not a dog, which is what we specified in this sentence right here. Okay, lists can also have multiple lists in them, so the list can actually have an elements that are going to be entire different lists. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we simply create a list with a name list, okay, and then we equal it to be equal to, for example, two different lists. So for example, we want to create a list to be equal to a list of actual ingredients for kitchen and integer numbers, we can do that. So for example, if you open square brackets, now you need to open another square brackets in the square brackets. In there you can specify, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a list of integers, then comma after closing the brackets, and open another square brackets and specify, for example, salt, carrot, basically anything you want, water, and for example, doesn't even matter, you can use, for example, apple, doesn't even matter. So if you press here enter, you successfully created an actual list that has two elements, and both of those elements are entire different lists. So the first element, which will be labeled as element 0, will have a list of integers, and the second element, which will be labeled as element 1, will have a list of, for example, kitchen ingredients, doesn't even matter, so food basically. Okay, and in order to actually select those elements from this list, for example, let's say you want to select only carrot and store it in a variable. So you can call a variable, for example, food to be equal, and then you need to specify how you can get to that simple element in a different element in a bigger list. So you need to specify the list, then open and close bracket, select the element from that list, which is the second element, because the second element is food. So this is the entire second element. And then another open and close bracket, and there you need to specify which element from the second element you want, which is number 1 once again, because carrot is at the second position, which is labeled as element 1. And if we just print food, you can see that the food is now carrot. Okay, simple as that. Let's say right now you want to create an integer value that will be number 4. You want to select 4 from this list, so we can select number variable to be equal to a list, first element of the list, which is the integers numbers, and then the number 4 itself, which is going to be at the third position. And then if we print the number, you can see that the number variable will store a value of 4. Okay. Now, also one more thing that you might be interested in is that you can also use negative indexes to select certain element from the list. Such as, for example, if you have a list, so let's create a new list to be equal to simply just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can select, let's say, the value of 5 in two ways. First one you already know, so list and then specify the 4, which will give you the element of 5. Or you can simply do list and in the bracket specify -1, which will also give you 5 because it will start counting from the end of the list, therefore specifying -1 right here. Okay, so that would be basically it about these basics of lists. Now we're going to continue with the lists in the next lecture, so hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!